Hello once again, and welcome to the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm your host, GX94 Agriculture Director Doug Falconer. We're joined by 620 CKRM Agri-News Director Ryan Young and by the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
The big news, of course, this week was Bill C-234, an amendment to the third reading in the Senate, and that seems to have kiboshed it, at least for the time being. Is that how you see it, Kevin?
I think so. There's lots of people worried that by the time it gets back up to be dealt with again by the House of Commons and then sent back to the Senate, that time is going to run out on this. And there's a lot of observers that know the political process now predicting that this is dead and the whole bill won't come to pass. But it's not beyond the realm of possibility that it could still return to the Senate and go somewhere. What's your analysis of it, Ryan?
Well, to add what you were saying about the federal Tories, they're currently in the midst of what we could call a filibuster, as they're doing a marathon vote on a variety of bills in an effort to pressure the Liberal government into removing the carbon tax on all forms of home heating. And it's been told that that could take up to 30 hours. So by now, we're probably into hour maybe 18, 19, who knows when. I know some people have said that some MPs have looked a little bit haggard. So we'll see how long that lasts further. In terms of the latest amendment, that's been a very persistent thing up in the Senate. Pierre Dalphon, one of the senators against the bill in its original form, repeatedly introduced the same amendment that was approved this week. So a lot of Tory senators up in the upper chamber were not happy about that, as well as around the agricultural community. I spoke with a couple of farm groups, the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association and the Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association, and I have some quotes here from Garner Diebald, the president of the stock growers. He says, with the amendment, it really just shows that they really aren't interested in reducing the cost of food. In many cases, we'll see inflation on food just increase costs due to the carbon tax. So it's very disappointing. And Grant McClellan, the CEO of the Cattlemen's Association, he thought at one point it was a sure thing to approve, going back as far as 2 or 3 months ago. And he also added, recalling the time that he was up in Ottawa with another board member advocating for passing Bill 234 in its original form. And he didn't really have high hopes of this bill now getting passed at all. So lastly, John Barlow, the conservative ag critic, he mentioned that they're going to do everything that they can, they being the Conservative Party, to try and get the bill back up to priority for debate, to get it back into the Senate and hopefully pass it. And this filibuster, as mentioned before, is kind of one of those ways to get it back up to the upper chamber.
Well, it sounds like most everyone now kind of believes it's probably just going to end up dying on the order paper before the next federal election. Is that probably a pretty safe bet?
Yeah, that's what Grant McClellan was saying, that it could die by then. And he said can't really see the bill, passing until the next federal election. So kind of echoing what you said, Doug.
Okay. Another issue that popped up here just in the last day or so is the pea situation into India. And Kevin, you've been following that.
Surprisingly, just out of the blue, and I guess there's some people wondering about whether India would change some of its import restrictions on all peas. But we used to send them 1.5 million tons per year to India, and they basically stymied that with import quotas and a number of other restrictions. But the weather hasn't been very good there. Food security is an issue, and they've announced that from now up until the end of March, all of those restrictions are lifted. And you saw pea prices just jump by 50 cents to $1 a bushel at a lot of bids, as a bunch of pea exporters trying to get product together to meet that window. Greg Cherowick of Pulse Canada, who follows this issue very, very closely, and confirmed that all of the restrictions have indeed been lifted. It wasn't just the quota that was lifted, the other restrictions lifted as well. Whether or not that will continue past the end of March is anyone's guess. It certainly could, but India has a history of not making these decisions until the last minute, so you never quite know what they're going to do. But it's big news for the pea industry that this market is now open, and some quantity at least is going to be shipped there before the end of March.
Refresh my memory, Kevin, you grow peas out at the farm there?
Sometimes I'm more of a specialty pea grower, so typically when I grow maple peas, and they typically go to China, so a little bit different issue. And you should also point out these are primarily yellow pea exports that go into, as I understand it, into India, not green peas. But you know, the jump in price was immediate when this news was announced.
I wonder what the likelihood was of maybe a low supply on India's end as to why these restrictions were lifted.
Yeah, they've had some drought conditions. Their rains have not been good. India always balances it though. On one hand, it doesn't want food prices to get out of hand. On the other hand, it's got millions of subsistence farmers that get upset if suddenly you do things to drop the price of their commodities. So they're always in a balancing act. India is now the most populous country on earth.
Of course, here we're seeing some pea prices rise, but canola has been, I guess, for the most part, trending downward even after a couple of days of rising prices. Kevin, what do you see there?
Yeah, the drops were just amazing the beginning of the week, and then it has recovered much of those losses. But when you start seeing canola cash bids in places that are 14.50, 14.70 a bushel, depending whether you're close to a crusher that might be paying more. But that's a big drop. That's a $3 a bushel drop since you know, the prices that we saw coming out of harvest. So that's a tremendous loss in value to the ag community if that price doesn't improve at some point.
And Ryan, you spoke with Adam Pacalo about that.
Yeah, he was. I asked him as to why, canola futures where they were, and he said, "Well, it's pretty much volatile, and that seems to be the word of the week, so to speak, as to why canola futures the way they are. Obviously, the soybean market always is a big factor with canola prices. With wherever soybeans go, canola usually goes. He also mentioned some potential rains in Brazil as being another factor. So that's kind of a wait and see approach. So some factors at play.
Absolutely. Another story you worked on this week, Ryan, was through Farm Credit Canada, and I guess the expected farm equipment sales coming into 2024. What did you learn from that?
Well, the biggest thing coming out of that report, Doug, was the fact that sales in 2024 were going to slow down due to a variety of factors. I spoke with one of the senior economists, Lee Anderson, and he noted high interest rates, increased equipment prices, a decline in commodity prices, as we just talked about, the drought in Western Canada, and tighter revenues in the livestock sectors because of said drought as being some of the things that are causing this projection to be where it is. The only things, interestingly enough, looking at one of the charts in terms of expected growth, there's only two equipment types that had positive gains for next year: four-wheel drive tractors at 6.4%, and agricultural implements such as air drills at 8.4%. Combines, tractors with over 100 horsepower, tractors between 40 and 100 horsepower, and less than 40 horsepower were all projected to decrease in sales next year. And that is partly due to, supply chain issues and manufacturing factors, among other things, to contribute to those things.
Kevin, what's your take on all of that?
Well, I think one of the big things is the huge increase we've seen in the cost of most pieces of equipment. And the farm management specialists with Manitoba Agriculture have done an analysis. Their new farm machinery guide is just out, so they've updated all their values of farm equipment for that guide. And the last guide was 2 years ago. In those 2 years, the prices of many classes of equipment, such as front wheel assist tractors, Class 9 combines, four-wheel drive tractors, are up by 25, 30, 35% in that 2-year time span. So we've seen a tremendous, for a number of reasons, a tremendous increase in farm machinery prices. And I think that's also going to give people some pause as they look at updating their equipment lines.
All right, and of course, another big item that came out of this week was Agribition, and they announced their attendance numbers for 2023. Ryan, you had a chance to speak to the CEO of Agribition.
That's right. Speaking with Sean Kindop, he was pretty pleased with where the attendance numbers were. 142,807 people came to this year's show. That's a 19% increase from last year and the highest attendance figure since 2005. So Sean was pretty proud and pretty excited about that number, obviously. There was a variety of things that played a part in it. The most obvious being the great weather that we had here in Regina throughout the week. I know when I was walking around in the morning doing my thing, there was a lot of people in the hallways walking around, large crowds, especially kids as well, by the school bus loads. So that's one part. There was also free admission on one of the days. And there was a few new things introduced at this year's Agribition. The first ever Miss Rodeo Agribition competition, the Animal Ag Tech Awards, and also freestyle bullfighting were introduced at this year's show. So it was a pretty good event overall. And I asked Sean if he's looking to top this year's numbers, and he's like, obviously, we want to top this year's numbers. We want to top it every year. So they're going to try and do that for next year. Work is already underway for 2024.
Kevin, it doesn't surprise you that there were pretty strong attendance numbers there this year?
But I think we were still suffering the effects of pandemic hangover up until this year. And I think it's really to the stage where people want to get out and do things and feel more comfortable. And a lot of these things are bouncing back, but great to see Agribition have a really strong year. It'll be interesting to see when they release their finances, how they did from a financial point of view.
All right, and looking ahead to next week, the Canary Seed Development Commission of Saskatchewan has some plans.
Yeah, I get to serve as executive director of the Canary Seed Commission, and our annual meeting is in Regina again this year. And even if you're not a Canary Seed grower, you're welcome to attend in person, or you're welcome to attend virtually. You can just go to canaryseed.ca and register. So if you're there in person, we have enough food. And if you're there virtually, we'll be able to send you the Zoom link. And we'll talk about where, obviously the business of the Canary Seed industry, and meet the new Canary Seed and Wheat breeder with the Crop Development Center, Dr. Adam Carter. Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research will give a market outlook for Canary Seed as well as competing crops. So a lot of market analysis you see in January, but this is an opportunity to get some idea of where Chuck sees the market going for a number of crops before that January timeframe. And yeah, the people there in person will get the food use canary seed, which is dehulled canary seed. We brand it by the name Alpiste, and we'll have a number of Alpiste foods for people there in person, and also Alpiste beer that people can test and see whether that's something that might be a commercial success.
All right, well, that sounds like a pretty interesting event coming up next week in Regina. So I think that'll do it for this week, though. And that's it for today's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, and 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young, I'm Doug Falconer, the GX94 Agriculture Director, saying so long until next week.